Hi guys, it's me, Andrew Markowitz again. Today's video came a little later because I had a day off today and just been doing a lot of work around the house and having to get a lot of stuff done. So that's why that's that way. I ended up catching a video earlier in the day that I was listening to at first, but then I decided to stop it because I wanted to end up reacting to it, and it was actually Nux Taku talking about this video right here, Charlie Kirk's Killer's Discord logs. Yeah, so I thought this would be a good kind of reaction video, especially because Charlie's kind of the big reason why I started this channel, so I can see no more fitting of a thing to do than have him be, reacting to this. So let's get into it.
By saying that I'm a little bit out of my depth here, considering the gravity of what I'm about to show you guys, but I'm gonna try my best. With that out of the way, let's get a few basic facts straight.
I also have never watched this guy ever, Turkey Tom. I think I've maybe watched him? I don't know. I've heard of him, never watched him.
The date is September 10th, 2025. Yeah. Charlie Kirk is shot and killed.
Yeah, he was.
Over the next few days, law enforcement and internet investigators pore over the available information to identify the killer. Eventually, they determine it to be Tyler Robinson, and they also realize that Tyler has a transgender romantic partner named Lance Twiggs. Tyler is arrested, Lance cooperates with the police, and then disappears from the public eye. 13 days later, I released a video going over all of the publicly available information about Tyler and Lance. Articles, witness testimony, Lance's TikTok and Reddit accounts, and I thought that was it.
Oh, that's who this guy is. Okay, so I definitely have seen part of it. I never watched that video, so I might watch that video, because I never watched it. So I might do that after this. But, okay, so that's who this guy is.
But then I received a message. This message was from a third party who was close to both of them and remained in contact for 6 years up until the attack took place.
Oh, joy.
They reached out to me providing never before seen information on the lead up to what happened. To my knowledge, the only other people who have this are the FBI. Now, as I go over this information, you'll notice that some of it is redacted, but I've redacted it myself with the exclusive intention to preserve the anonymity of both this person and other people who are named, who have nothing to do with Tyler's crime. Now keep in mind, these claims are being made by an anonymous leaker. There could be more to certain events that we're simply not aware of, and other details that may explain more of the story. Additionally, some of this video is my opinion and should be treated as such.
Okay.
But I've done my best to provide you all with the information I'm able to share to the extent it can be verified. In his first message to me, this person said, "Hello, I just watched your video on the Charlie Kirk assassin Tyler and thought you did a good job. I happen to know Tyler and Lance in real life. I don't take a lot of pictures, so I can't prove it very well, but I am in Discord servers where both of them are, including the one where Tyler posted his confession. I have some pictures of the apartments and some stories I can tell." There were 2 pictures attached underneath. One of Tyler's confession in the Discord chat that matched the ones published by Ken Klippenstein.
Okay, cool. Well, now that his Discord name is leaked, I will tell you right now, that allows for a lot more hunting of information,
which were then republished by every major news outlet. The other picture is a completely original photo of local police at Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs' place, taken from across the street.
Okay.
For the sake of verification, he later also provided me with archives of the 3 Discord servers they shared, which I'll eventually go over the relevant parts of. Once this person's identity was verified, he proceeded to tell me about the state of Tyler and Lance's living space. The apartment would drastically shift from clean to super dirty, depending on the state of Lance's mood. I don't have too many pictures.
Joy. That's great to hear. That's a sign of some problems I'm very familiar with, so
pictures of most of the mess, but basically, he'd start living in the living room and just start turning it into his nest. After the first roommate moved out, and right after Tyler moved in like 2 weeks later, Lance had a really big breakdown. The living room went from a place guests came over to something that had to be hid. People still came over, but everyone got weirded out by all the trash. He basically had layers of wires, random Temu trinkets, decorations, random art projects, clothes, and empty alcohol containers everywhere.
Okay, I never did this, ever. I thought this was like some depressional stuff. I personally suffer, I guess I'll get into this a little bit. I was in the Army. I was in for exactly 1 year. I completed my basic training. I completed my AIT. I got honorably discharged early. It was during COVID. What had happened was I went into the Army in not the best mental state. This was maybe 18 months after my sexual assault that I had when I first joined the workforce, and just hadn't really accepted that that's what happened to me, and hadn't really realized that was what happened to me, and was doing everything in my power to not accept that fact, and trying to get it out of my head and running away from my problems. Learn the lesson. That's not a good idea and good thing to do. It will destroy you, and it will break you. As I found out, because while I was in the military, I then had a female trainee physically aggress me while we were in lines, in platoon formations. This never went to CID. There's no record of this, sadly, because none of this went above DS pay grade, because originally they were going to come bring the hammer down on me because my drill sergeant just already didn't like me. I'm very good at people just not liking me. It's a common hobby I seem to have with myself, is I'm very good at making people upset with me. Anyways, I get threatened with all of that. That case falls dead before it ever even hits CID, purely because of the fact that she decided to assault me in platoon lines in front of like 60 other people. 20 people saw it, 15 of which were good friends of mine and lived with me in my bay, and were fully willing to testify to exactly what happened and exactly what I did, which was push her off of me and scream as loud at the top of my lungs, "Do not fucking touch me." And those were my exact words. For obvious reasons, because I had dealt with a lot of physical abuse from my sisters, and the sexual assault that I was still realizing I hadn't fully recovered from. Yeah, I reacted that way, and in that manner, because lo and behold, when you've been beaten and assaulted continuously and constantly, you don't hold well to things. Anyways, flash forward, I'm recovering from that, because after that happened, I had 3 more instances. Again, none of this went above drill sergeant grade, either because we kept it to ourselves, we kept it among trainees, or drill sergeants didn't want to push it. I got assaulted 3 different times, and I had over 20 people threaten to assault me in that time. Usually they would do so privately, when they had me alone, to some degree. They would threaten to fucking kill me, or beat my ass, that I was such a horrible person for pushing her off of me and attacking her, and they just fully believed her. Even though that's not what happened, that's not what most people saw, that's not what I did at all. I literally, she grabbed me by my shoulders and dragged me out of the platoon line screaming at me, I did what would be considered, I guess, like an X blocking motion, brought my arms up and pushed them to the side and stepped forward as I did so, and got in her face and screamed at her at the top of my lungs, "Do not fucking touch me." And I just had my arms up on my sides in a wide open guard stance, kind of like, "You going to continue this? Do I need to keep myself closed?" Like, I was instantly ready to go, because I don't take well to physical violence happening to me, because I had it happen so often. And a hard lesson you learn when you've had a lot of physical violence happen to you is, if you don't aggress back to any degree, they will keep doing it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They will keep physically assaulting you over and over again. I learned that in elementary school. Like, either you throw some hands back, or you're not gonna like where it goes. That's a hard fact of life. It sucks, but that's a hard fact of life. Anyways, flash forward through basic. I graduate basic training. I'm still dealing with a couple of the guys from there, and I'm gonna be very vague on this. I was dealing with some serious familial problems that had previously happened, and those family members had those issues previously. And they were real. Is the only way I can describe them, and I don't want to go into too much details because I haven't asked these family members for permission to share these things. These things, when they happened, affected me very deeply, and like left severe scars in my memory. Like, I'll never forget those mornings. But this was during COVID, and we were told directly. I remember very clearly when we first got to AIT on one of our first mornings, as a reminder to all new recruits, you are not going home, and do not ask me about going home unless there is a dead body or a new one being born. I remember those words. Unless it is a body going in the ground or a new one coming out of a womb, you are not going home. And the issues I had were only a risk of a dead body. So, with that in mind, it broke me. I'll just be honest, it broke me. I eventually snapped, broke down. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating. I was just disgusting. Is the only way I can describe myself. Like, I just did not care. I had lost all psychological forms of reasoning and everything. Like, I was self-destructive in the most awful ways a human being can be, besides doing drugs and alcohol. And yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. Ended up in the psych ward for 3 days eventually, because I attempted suicide. I had a plan. I was ready to execute. I'm not going to go into the details of that. They pulled me aside, and and in both times, originally I was just going there to see the doctor for sleep, but when the suicide questions came up, this is why I'm such a God-fearing Christian, is when these suicide questions came up, I've lied on so many of those suicide question tests so many times in my life. I've lied on so many psychological tests so many times in my life, it's not even funny. And I've passed, I'll tell you this way, I've passed them with flying colors. I couldn't lie this time. there was something else that came inside me and went, you can't lie here. I won't let you lie here. You're going to answer this truthfully. And I did. And when I did, I was pulled inside by a colonel's office. He asked me, are these real? And again, I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I said what I did. But I just went, yeah, here's my whole plan. Here's when I was planning on doing it. Here's why I planned on doing it then. And yeah, I told him the truth. He called the hospital and he threw me in the psych ward. Because he could see that I was being real. Like, this wasn't like some trooper that wanted to go home and was homesick and dealing with COVID issues. This was a trooper who was like just broken. This is a soldier who was just broken. And so I got put in an ambulance, and it was weird because a week before that I had already gone to the hospital because I ended up getting shocked. I was an aircraft electrician, 15 Fox, and we were testing on one of the helicopters. And the fuse boxes in those Blackhawks are very tiny and very tight. And I had my finger up, and there's very little space for your fingers between the bus bars on them. And I was testing with a multimeter up on it, and I slightly bent my finger, and I hit the DC side of the amp bar, of the bus bar, with just this part right here, the top of my finger. You guys can't see, I forget. Like the top tip of my finger was like slightly touching, as it shouldn't be, the steel of my prong, because it was the only way I could actually get it to hold and stay still, because I was dealing with a flat piece. And my knuckle, my second knuckle, from going from like the wrist down, my second knuckle connected, and I dropped it to the ground. Thankfully it wasn't a full side-to-side body connection, so it wasn't actually a severe shock, but it was bad enough that like 2 hours later, I was an apprentice electrician before this, I got told, I felt one of the big warning signs that they train you to learn about when you learn first aid, which is I felt pain in my chest. Like my heart, like physically hurt. It scared the crap out of me so badly, I was like, hey, yeah, I would like to go to the hospital and get this checked out. Thankfully nothing was wrong, but like I had training my whole life, and I wasn't gonna ignore that training, because that's a good way to end up dead. And I don't know why then I didn't want to die, and then 2 weeks later, like everything just washed over me, and I really did. I came up with my plan. I was ready to execute. I was done. I was ready. And then, like I said, something came over me, and I spent 3 days in that psych ward unable to talk to or deal with anybody besides the other psych ward people. I remember I read like 2 whole books at my time there in 3 whole days, because I had nothing else to do. So it's what I did. It was the first time I actually read a book in like probably 4 years, because like my life had become a mess, and I just stopped caring, and I stopped reading, and one bad event after another kept happening, and yeah. So I thought this was depressional issues, but clearly this is some like next level stuff. Like, yeah, because like I've been bad. Like, I've let my apartments and places and rooms just get destroyed and filled with trash and clutter, but I never cared about the clutter. Like, the clutter didn't have any value to me. I didn't care about it. Like, if someone would throw away from me, I'd have been more than happy. Like, I just didn't care. Like, mine was just a complete apathy of existence, is the best way I can describe it. And that often comes over me, especially in the mornings. Just when I wake up, I feel very apathetic, very empty. And when I do, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm gonna just pray to God real quick and have him come to me, because there's not much else I can do. I know this was a really long pause, for probably most of you, not a very interesting tidbit of life, but I just feel compelled to share that. So let's get into this and continue.
And if anyone touched it, he would get livid. One friend got banned from the apartment for a while because he kept touching the Temu trinkets. I wish I still had pictures, but I felt sort of guilty and deleted them since I knew Lance wasn't in the right state of mind. For context, I've been playing games with Lance and Tyler for like 6 years. I count myself kind of close to them, but I was trying to separate them from myself because being around them wasn't good for me. I say them, but
good on this guy for recognizing that, because I failed to recognize that with some people in my life, and when I got home from the military, it took me down a very dark and shitty road that, well, there was a reason why I ended up couch hopping for about 5 years and being frequently homeless. I chose to hang around dumb people who used and abused me, and, yeah, wasn't fun.
Tyler was always level-headed and easygoing. But Lance could be anywhere from too depressed to talk to manic, wide-eyes, crazy person. I'll take a brief moment here to comment on the fact that in my original video, this is more or less the...
I've never been manic. I've always been like either just absurdly depressed or just like dead inside neutral.
Impression that I had, judging exclusively from Lance's more significant and expressive online presence relative to Tyler's almost non-existent digital paper trail. From Lance's Reddit account and the things his family members had...
That's interesting, but because they're partners, you probably can translate a decent amount of information from this guy to Robin.
To say about him, he clearly was more outspoken, and in some ways, unstable. There were Reddit posts of his mentioning being at...
I was told I was possessed by a demon, and then within 30 minutes kicked out of the house because I started laughing and wouldn't go to the bishop for a blessing. Later found out they just didn't like me and were looking for a way to get me out of the house. Wasn't even 18 at the time. I think it has more to do with the fact that they felt... because he's Mormon, so... I have a lot of interesting discourse about Mormons that I'm not going to get into. It's not that I hate them. Let me be very clear about that. I don't believe they're Christians. They didn't start calling them, for one thing, they didn't start calling themselves as a part of the Christian sect until like 1910, 1930s? Somewhere in that range. They didn't start asking to be called as a part of Christians. They thought the rest of us were going to burn in hell because we were heretics. It's in their stuff. I don't know. I don't think it's probably still on their websites, but you research the old writings and stuff like that of their founders and stuff like that you can find. It's there, and there's a lot of reasons why I have disagreements with them. Maybe I'll make a video on it.
Odds with his family to the point of being kicked out, and he had also discussed a lot of substance abuse issues.
So I'm no experienced alcoholic. I need to start with that. Just want to talk about this summer. It seemed like a good subreddit. I got a bottle of 40% vodka from a friend, and this would be the second time really drinking for me. I remember drinking about a fifth of it within 5 hours. This is after I was pretty mildly high, and upon arriving home, I got into a solidly relaxed high. I drank 2 energy drinks and felt warmed up and ready for more. This is where it gets blurry for me. I know I decided to drink more because I was tipsy, but I figured I could just go to sleep if I had too much. Then I wake up at 2 a.m., vomit everywhere, no more vodka, some concerned parents banging on my door. They got me cleaned up. Literally everything in my room had been taken out and cleaned. All my clothes, bed sheets, PC. Somehow I got it everywhere in my room, on the shelves, under my bed. I don't plan on touching alcohol again anytime soon, especially when I'm not alone. I hate that I'm relating to this Lance guy. I kind of do. Really kind of shows you the roads you can go down. What was this? 18 months after the military, maybe a little less. I was working, was it my security job? Yeah, I think it was my security job. And I got some bad news. I did not like that bad news. I bought an entire gallon of whiskey. I had not eaten all day. And I decided that that gallon of whiskey was going to be down my gullet within an hour. And it was. I was playing Destiny 2 with a couple of friends. And next thing I know, I'm on the floor, and there's blood and vomit all over the floor. I was able to play for like 3 hours straight after drinking a gallon of whiskey before I blacked out. And I blacked out for 2.5 hours. Then my head felt like hell. My friend was still on the line. That was honestly my second attempt at dying, because I just didn't care, and I thought, oh cool, maybe I'll just die doing this. I decided that wasn't a fun way to die, so I've now have a rule of, cool, if someone offers me a drink, I will have one drink and that's it. And if I'm going to drink, it's going to be one drink. I want to like if it's a celebration, one drink. Doesn't matter what it is. That's why I'm kind of like a whiskey kind of guy, or like something that I can just sip on all day and all time, the whole time at a party, and don't have to worry about it. No one's gonna say shit, because like, just because I'm not pounding drinks, I am drinking. I'm just not pounding drinks like everybody else, because I like to be cautious with my liquor, especially because like my body seems to take that stuff and just say, I don't care. Like that scared me enough to go, I need to be really careful with this stuff.
Which are a far cry from the quiet, even if uneasy, relationship that Tyler seemed to have with his family. What was completely unknown, and as far as I know hasn't been published anywhere, is this combination of hoarding and mania that this person describes Lance as exhibiting. The messages continue. During this first nest phase, Lance started working very rarely. He worked with his dad for a tub repair company. They'd either repair tubs or install them at construction sites. But when Lance was super depressed or just too manic, he'd take the day off and hit his THC vape, drink, and scroll reels. Anyway, 2 weeks before Lance's first nest phase, when
I've never done that. Work has been one of the few things that, like, I guess I can't live for I struggle to live for myself, so I just live for other people. So work is actually a great thing for me, because it's one of the few things that makes me get up in the morning and go, I have people counting on me. I can't fail other people. I can fail myself. I'm perfectly okay doing that. I know I shouldn't be, but I perfectly am okay doing that. And that's what I do. So, yeah.
Apartment was mostly normal. Tyler moved in with Lance because he just...
I guess going into that a little more, I very, 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 very rarely actually take days off of work. I usually shift swap people. I'm usually the one of the people, like, if they need to call people in, I get called in. I just take it, say yes, I don't fight people on that, and I just work. Like, I'm incredibly awful at helping myself and relying on myself. Well, I'm very self-reliant, more so taking care of myself, but I am incredibly good at just prioritizing everybody else around me and making sure their needs are met.
Just dropped out of college and was tired of living with his parents. He had been working with his dad at a stone cutting business where they'd install countertops. Tyler was kind of your normal blue-collar Utah guy. Most conversations with him, he'd talk hunting, camping, gaming, and he loved to talk about fishing. Now, first off, the combination of depressants with cognitive stimulants are leading factors to severe anxiety.
So I never did cognitive stimulants. I did weed one time. I smoked once, and I will never do it again, because it ended with me it ended with me, like, I got suicidal again. I don't know what YouTube will allow, so I'm not gonna go into detail on that one. Yeah, not gonna go into detail on that one. So, whew, this is actually kind of a scary and tough video for me, because wow, it's crazy how much of a different life I could have gone down had I just given in.
Paranoia, depression, and even psychosis. And that's without mentioning the documented connection between weed and schizophrenia. Obviously, as I assume most of you know, weed basically has two components, THC and CBD. CBD is not psychoactive, and it's often associated with treatments for anxiety, pain, and inflammation. Meanwhile, THC is psychoactive, and despite it also having some therapeutic uses in the treatment of nausea and side effects of chemotherapy, THC is the component of marijuana that's associated with symptoms like paranoia, psychosis, and, like previously mentioned, schizophrenia. Now, obviously, the vast majority of stoners or casual smokers are not exhibiting these symptoms. This is not a typical thing. But in certain people who are predisposed, THC can absolutely trigger a sort of psychotic meltdown, or it can compound with other mental health issues to make them just much, much worse. In Lance's case, it sounds like he was using way too much pot, while simultaneously drinking heavily and scrolling reels. If there's any...
So I'm gonna make a side comment on this. And I only know this because I have met... There was a Mormon church literally right in my neighborhood. And like right across the high school. That I ended up going to school at. Yeah. My best friend in the whole world is Mormon. He saved my life. I'm not Mormon. I'll be clear about that. He saved my life when I had nowhere to go and I was going to be sleeping in my car again. He saved my life by giving me a place to stay. It's where I live now. I thank God every day for that, and I thank every day for that opportunity to engage with Him about this. Because what I'm about to share, like, probably, like, if there's any Mormons watching this, I'm like, no, it's a thing, it's not a thing. It is a thing. There is a high frequency link of alcohol abuse problems in people who are Mormon, more so in their kids and things of that nature, and substance abuse problems of them all the time. Like, of a lot of varying grades. It is not uncommon for them to fall out of the Mormon church. I don't know the convergency rates of Mormonism. I honestly think they're still not that high. I think they make a lot of money off their members, I know that much. I think they do a decent amount of good for the world, and I think they display a good face. But part of what Christ asks when we bear fruits is to also look at how do these people act privately, and how do their children act in response to the messaging they're giving. I will tell you this, when most people go to college and deconvert from Christianity, they might become a bit of a stoner, they might become a bit of that. Mormons get deeply into this stuff, continuously and frequently. It seems like when they go off the rails, they go off the rails deep. And it's not uncommon for them to go off the rails. There's a lot of ex-Mormons who have serious substance abuse problems, have serious problems with these kind of things. So this is not surprising information to me. And this isn't, again, something I can statistically say. This is just, I grew up around a lot of these people, around a lot of their kids, and, like, so did my mom, and, like, I hear stories from her, I hear stories from my friend. Like, I was in Colorado, is where I originally lived, so right next to Utah, like, This is the quiet part. It doesn't get said about their church a whole lot. It's very frequently a problem in their churches. I think honestly, if I had to guess, I think the deconvergency rate from their children is pretty high. They have an apostasy problem, similar to Islam. So, yes, I think that is quite interesting to look at.
Way someone can derive psychosis and mania from first principles, this is definitely up there. Now, in my original video about this, trigger a sort of psychotic meltdown, or it can compound with other mental health issues to make them just much worse. In Lance's case, it sounds like he was using way too much pot, while simultaneously drinking heavily and scrolling reels. If there's any way someone can derive psychosis and mania from first principles, this is definitely.
When he says first principles, what does he mean? Does he mean like surface level thinking? Someone help me with that one. Post it down in the comments if you can. It'll be great.
Up there. Now, in my original video about this topic, I mentioned that there were two specific periods of change for Lance and Tyler by extension. The first was 2020, when the pandemic hit, locking everyone inside their houses and apartments, and therefore driving them to spend a lot more time on the old computer. And as the Discord logs are going to show later, it's probably when Lance and Tyler started to communicate the most frequently, even if they were already gaming and talking prior. The second period was during 2024, which is when Tyler moved into the apartment with Lance. And as their anonymous peer here is saying, within 2 weeks of Tyler being there, Lance began his nest phase, as he puts it. Funnily enough, the one other instance I've ever heard of making a nest in your living room comes from Theo Vaughn talking about what he did during binges of the white dust kind of stimulant.
Oh no.
I remember that. I'll make a nest in my living room, dude. Boy.
And more than anything else you can think of.
Turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You'll be out on your own porch, you know?
Yeah.
While this description is obviously played up in its context, it's actually a pretty common experience to start.
Does anyone hoard when they're manic? I hoard yarn. I used to hoard books. Manics like me start. Manic me likes to crochet projects. We never finish them, so I have like 30 projects doing crochet. I have a closet full of yarn in half of my room. I donated a lot of my books to the public library to make space because I've been watching hoarders and it's really freaking me out. As I was going through the books, I also started reading like 50 of them and just never finished. Very frustrated because of one, I probably wasted thousands on this stuff, and two, no space in my room, and it takes forever to clean because I have to literally rearrange things, move them away to reach my spots, and I also feel like I'm drowning in projects. Low-key want to throw everything away. Fascinating. I'm not manic, so like that's interesting to me because like I don't really hoard. Like I honestly actually purposely try to not buy a whole lot of things, and like because I know I have a problem of like I just don't take care of myself and don't take care of things around me a lot of the time, like physically. I purposely try not to buy a whole lot of things to take care of because I know I won't take care of it. So, very interesting to me.
Hoarding while in states of paranoid mania, which is what Lance appeared to be going through. From his Reddit history, we know that Lance used to be a big fan of Jordan Peterson, who is widely known as the clean your room guy.
Interesting how he fell off, so this guy fell off the deep end. This guy was going on a side, and then he just decided, fuck it, and just jumped. Okay.
Harping on how your living space reflects your psyche. If this leaker is telling the truth, then it would make sense that as Lance's mental state deteriorated, so did the physical space around him. With all of that information regarding Lance being corroborated by these messages, we also have the reveal that Tyler had dropped out of college and decided of his own volition to move out. In my original video, we had the information that he was in an electrical apprenticeship program at Dixie Technical College. But based on these messages, it seems he dropped out and was just working at a masonry business with his dad. Again, this matches the picture of Tyler that one can derive from all of the testimonies regarding what kind of person he was. So after about 5 years or so of being friends with Lance, he decides to move in with him. But at this point, there's no sign that the two are engaged in a romantic relationship. Their peer continues. I felt super bad when he first moved in with Lance because it was normal for like 2 weeks, and then Lance went nuts, and the entire downstairs just became his nest. He'd be doing experiments in the kitchen, which were mostly just growing mold in Tupperware mugs, and the kettle with random Temu trinkets and rocks submerged in them. Every once in a while, I'd try to have a talk with Lance and try to get him to realize he needed help without making him go ballistic. Now, this is actually bizarre. One of the things I didn't pay that much attention to in my first video about this was that Lance made 2 posts regarding growing fungi, one of them in r/mushroom growers.
If anyone is wondering, these are called Lampramine albedafine. Forgive me for being uneducated. What benefit does this provide besides looking awesome? Ugh.
And another one of them in r/shroom.
I'd go to conversion therapy if that was the shtick. Low, better than the electroshock my area endorses. So that's not true. This guy was already, it was 2 years ago. This guy was already in the deep end. He went from listening to Peterson and probably took to liking what Destiny was saying and a lot of that crowd was saying more than Peterson. So not surprising.
However, they were very brief non sequiturs that didn't at all give the impression of how deeply invested Lance was into growing mushrooms, which apparently he was, at least during his episodes. The interest in mushrooms peaking when Lance is at his craziest reminds me of the Cult of the Lamb Cordyceps that takes over one of the characters and makes him want to grow more mushrooms.
Never played that
this
game,
is
so
extremely strange behavior, but my personal autism aside, the messages continue. I'm not going to say it was all just him being insane. His mom is super Mormon and also kind of crazy, so there's that. And all of the drugs. Weed, LSD, shrooms, DMT, and I think he said Molly, but I'm not sure. Also, alcoholic levels of alcohol. Lance has always been a little weird.
Okay, so just the problems that I already highlighted before are showing their faces, and that's not surprising.
And quirky, but never really crazy. He was constantly arguing with his mom every time he saw her, and then ranting about Republicans and Mormons when he got home. I'd sometimes talk with him for like 4 hours of him just ranting about his mom and family. He really hates Mormons. Also, at the time, politically, Lance and I would both probably describe ourselves as libertarian, and Tyler was very apolitical. On his Reddit account, there is one relatively old post about Lance having substance abuse problems.
I'll definitely read through the Alcohol Explained book. The blackout piece was solid. I didn't think about choking. See, this is why I hate that Reddit though, is because like I've been on there, and it's not about trying to get people help. It's just, oh, this is how you avoid this. This is how you avoid this. It's just like, how about you help you realize you have a problem in drinking and help stop drinking? Like, oh my god. This is why Reddit just sucks. I'm gonna just say it. Reddit sucks. I don't go on there often because this crap.
And you could assume that due to him no longer posting about it, he no longer struggled with it. Apparently, it was the opposite, as over time, it only got worse. And it's really the mention here of DMT that stands out to me. While the other drugs are bad enough and can permanently damage your brain, especially in combination with each other, even people who like DMT will tell you about how careful you have to be about using it, even if you try your best to do it in a therapeutic setting. But clearly, Lance was in no state of mind to manage his substance intake in any way that resembled healthy. It almost freaks me out how easily someone like Lance could get his hands on that kind of thing, despite being completely out of his mind for months.
That's not that surprising, bro. Drugs are so easy access in the modern day. If you live in any mildly urban environment or suburban environment, it's not even funny. You can easily access any kind of drugs.
Months on end. This set of messages also confirm another suspicion of mine expressed in the first video. Prior to 2024, neither Lance nor Tyler were particularly political, as they only ever expressed opinions that could be loosely classified as social.
I'm gonna take a wild guess. What we're not seeing in their history media, social media feeds, is, and what we probably would see is that they probably watched a lot of Destiny, a lot of Hassan, a lot of the left side of the YouTube in the world, and did not choose to listen to the other side at all. In which case, doesn't surprise me that their rhetoric starts to heat up around 2024 and starts going bananas.
Liberal, which most young Zoomers are by default anyway. However, this changed suddenly and drastically during the year that they lived together. He had his nest phase for probably 3 to 4 months before he sort of went back to normal. But at the tail end of his nest phase, after we had both talked for a while, he told me he was trans, and that it wouldn't change anything, and that I could
That's not true. It will change things. It will change a lot. It'll change everything. I'm not going to go into that. Those details don't need to be exposed. But I'm not trans. I was in a relationship. A long-term relationship. And suddenly this was dropped on me. It does change things. It will change things. They will care about those things. And yeah, that's never true.
Even use whatever pronouns, and he wouldn't care. Over the next week and a half, the living room got dismantled. He vacuumed and cleaned the kitchen a bit, but he still kept one mold experiment outside for some reason. It was kind of relieving.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was doing mushrooms or something like that.
To not see so much trash lying around. We weren't allowed to toss even the most mundane trash like napkins and Taco Bell sauce packets, which there was an entire drawer of, so seeing all the cans and bottles disappear was super nice. Whenever we came over, people commented on how it's nice that we could hang out without being scared of accidentally touching trash or a trinket and having Lance freak out. We'd have a mostly weekly Magic the Gathering night at the apartment where everyone would come drink, get high, and play Magic. Lance started attending again after he became mostly normal. It's interesting to see that him identifying as trans came while he was in his nesting phase, but he maintained it after it had ended. It does startle me a bit how basically all of Lance's friend group, who frequently visited Lance and Tyler's house, just kind of tolerated this going on.
That doesn't surprise me. They're doing the same things and they don't want to. They're of the world. They're doing the same things and they don't. And if they call you out for it, they have to call themselves out for it. People don't want to do that. People don't have the strength oftentimes to do that. They don't have the strength to do it to themselves, and they don't have the strength to do it for other people. So it doesn't surprise me that they just let this happen. Like, I had this. Let this happen to me. I almost fell off the cliff in the deep end. Like, you would not believe. I didn't. In doing so, it cost me a place of living. It cost me a relationship. It cost me a lot of things. It cost me food. It cost me a lot. I went homeless again, and I slept in my car for a bit. Had to find a place to stay. Couch hopped. There's a lot going on, but
on for months.
I'm glad I chose not to.
I have no idea how it's possible to put up with a situation so clearly deranged for that long, but hey.
Oh, it's easy. Oh, it's super easy. It is so easy to put up with this. It is so easy to put up with this. One, because you love and care about the other person, and you think that by loving and caring about the other person, you just have to concede these points, because that's what the world teaches you to do. So it's actually super, super, super easy. If you're a good friend and a good person, you call them out on their bullshit. You get them help. You willingly engage in the arguments and the fights and stand unflinching in opposing them when they're walking down the wrong path. That's a good friend. That's someone who actually cares about you. Most of the people modern day people care about call friends will never do that for you in your life. They will never do that. They see an opportunity to escape you. If you're in a sign of trouble or anything like that, they will do so. They will leave you abandoned on the roadside. So this isn't shocking at all. I know that because I did it to myself when I was involved in my relationship. I hung on for way too long, hoping and trying, and just being an idiot. I'll just say it. I was stupid. I was being stupid. And yeah, so I perfectly see how this can happen. This doesn't surprise me at all. This isn't surprising at all. Like, not surprising at all.
Different strokes for different folks. Now
it's not different strokes for different folks. It's people who actually truly care and love you, and people who think they care and love you. That's what it is.
This next set of messages that I find really interesting. Between all of his turns while playing Magic, Lance would go hang out with Tyler, and we'd have to call him to the tables every time it was his turn. One of my gym buddies was the...
Oh, so wow. Okay, yeah, they're really... That's a sign right there. They're really into each other.
First to pick up on Tyler and Lance being really close. I was in denial for months because I thought Tyler was straight.
I don't doubt it. I was in denial for months about the person I was dating saying the things they were saying, and that drove me off another cliff, and that was a fun one to climb back out of. Yeah.
And also, I kind of did not want it to be true. Eventually, I kind of snapped out of it like the nth time I saw them asleep, cuddling on the couch. I kind of didn't think too much of it.
You didn't snap out of it. You just accepted terms and accepted things. Shut up, angry JavaScript stupidity. Go away.
Since Lance would get super cuddly every time he got drunk, which is how I think they got together, because I'm pretty sure Tyler was a virgin when he moved in. So probably when Lance was in the cuddly mood, probably something happened. But
that almost worries me. That there might be more to this situation. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some SA to some degree that started this relationship, and some psychological conditioning and warping. I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't shock me when we get to trial and we find that out. And I think why our Butto has disappeared is because he's on the run trying not to have to testify. And he might actually be getting charged for some things. And trying to keep that hush-hush for now because we want to handle this guy first, Tyler first, as we should. And our government is trying to be kind and quiet to the crazy trans person.
That's just my guess. This is where a lot of things start clicking together. Tyler, an introverted gamer who, as far as anyone could tell, had no prior relationships of any significance, spent 4 months living with anyone could tell.
Oh my god, man.
Had no prior relationships of any significance.
I can see it in the eyes, man. It's the eyes. I can see it in the eyes. His soul is gone. He's gone. He's no longer of the world or of anything.
And spent 4 months.
You can see, it's blurry, but like you can see some soul here, and then we go back. Empty. Void.
As far as anyone could tell, had no prior relationships of any significance, spent 4 months living with his best friend, Lance, who apparently got overly cuddly with everyone while drunk, and simultaneously had the proclivity to drink too often. It's not surprising that this was the outcome of a touch-starved virgin gamer living in the same house as a touchy-feely, seemingly manic trans person. However, a while after Lance had mostly gone back to normal, things started to intensify again. I started noticing changes in Lance's political views as the presidential election got closer. He amped up the complaints of old people staring at him, which probably was because he dressed like a stoner and not because he was female presenting, because all he did in that department was grow out his hair and wear mascara every once in a while. He also hated that the construction workers would misgender him, which I thought was weird since he said he was fine with any pronoun. Tyler wouldn't really get political until after the election. He'd sometimes just casually bring up the latest thing Trump had done and complain about what it'd do to the country, but in a very level-headed way. Before the election, Lance's friend group was the quirky LGBT group with a lot of mental illnesses. Not saying the two are linked, but that's how my friends
I'll say that they're probably linked, man. The amount... Obviously, with the person I was dating, I was in a lot of servers, Discord servers, with a lot of people who are that way. The chances of someone being LGBT and having some form of mental disorder is, I believe, just naturally in the statistics, very, very, very high. Which, truly correlated, I don't know. But, yeah. Very interesting.
Knew them. They're the people who are in Lance's server for the most part. After the election, they became a lot more political, but not to an extremist level. By this point, I could safely say Lance and Tyler were some flavor of left-wing, while I'd become tired of politics and mostly apolitical, but never anything I thought was like dangerous. At some point, they told me about their relationship and were pretty open about it after that. It became very uncomfortable for me because while I don't think of myself as homophobic, seeing two dudes constantly make out.
I'm not, but I've been sexually assaulted twice by two men in my life, so like, and both of them, one was bisexual, the other was gay, so I very much, like, I'll just be honest, yeah, I have my dislike a lot of the time, and very cautious, because I've had bad experiences, and yeah, I do judge a bit off my bad experiences, because life has taught me, and when I don't judge off my bad experiences and my bad experiences of things, I tend to deal with it again, and I don't like dealing with the same bad thing twice.
Out was a bit much. Also, since Lance's room was always super messy, they would bang in Tyler's room, and I didn't like hearing it. I cannot imagine how much it sucked to be in this guy's shoes. While this is a bit out of character for Tyler, who's been consistently described as reserved, it does match Lance's behavior of being overly transparent and letting other people, even people who randomly visited him, see into his intimate life to a point where it's concerning. It's also fitting that Lance's pre-existent paranoid behaviors were now manifesting in correlation to his gender, as despite not being particularly female presenting or being concerned with being seen and treated as a woman, he still took issue with anyone who perceived him as a man. People who are paranoid often assume others look upon them negatively, no matter how asinine the reason may be. Clearly, Lance's mental state was deteriorating, and whether intentionally or not, he was dragging Tyler along with him. And this became increasingly transparent over time. Their mutual acquaintance continues. Lance started becoming more and more erratic again until, at the end of December, he just had another nuclear meltdown after having another argument. Also, a couple months before, we noticed Lance had been growing breasts and said that he'd been taking black market HRT, which I do not know what that entailed, but I think it was making him very erratic. So he basically shut down for like 2 weeks, not talking, just hitting his vapes in the living room in the dark. So here we have the mention of possibly one of the most concerning details about what kind of substances Lance was on at this point in time. Taking synthetic hormones of any kind, whether the kind and quantity your body already produces or not, is extremely dangerous and can cause pretty much every kind of health issue imaginable, including mental. Even if you're a guy and you take just a little bit of testosterone, you can suffer all kinds of side effects. So obviously, in Lance's case, the risks are much greater by default, and it's made exponentially more dangerous given the circumstances. This is someone who has proven himself to be delusional, chronically sleep deprived, and prone to overdoing substances. There is simply no chance he was mentally well enough to manage and administer dosages of any kind, let alone procure or produce untainted bathtub HRT. While studies on this stuff are hard to come by, there have been a few documented cases of people in similar situations to Lance. For example, there's one case of a person in their early 20s with a history of depression and psychosis who self-induced drug intoxication via HRT, which led to a worsening of their psychosis and all of their other psychiatric disorders. Uncoincidentally, this is when Lance becomes more unhinged than ever before, as his peer continues to allege. I thought he kind of started going back to normal after that because he started talking again, but I was so wrong. I had another magic night at the end of January, so even though Lance wasn't completely fine, I just kind of did it to test the waters. I should have guessed because the nest was starting to form again. He was watching Doctor Who in the living room, and so I thought if he was just doing that, he'd be fine. But people started to show up and talk before we started, and he just started yelling at us from the other room to shut up, which we thought was a joke since this was standard magic night procedure. He yelled again, and then we got quiet until enough people showed up to start a game. During the game, one of my more autistic friends started to bring up transgenders in sports. He literally couldn't get any further than those two words before Lance yelled at him to shut up from the other room. And to everyone's amazement, he tried to bring it up like 3 more times in rapid succession, being shouted down literally not even a second after he started his sentence every time. It became a very awkward game. It's pretty funny to think back on now. Bro could not take a hint. No. After that, more people showed up, and we started having 2 games going, and the mood mostly stabilized, and Lance just came in with sort of a loopy grin and a bottle of something. I'll summarize this part briefly since this person...
Yeah, probably because he was blasted out of his fucking mind and couldn't understand or see a single thing being said. That's not surprising.
...goes into a bit of detail about what happened, but Lance proceeded to throw this guy...
Started trying to get my attention while we were playing and started mixing a bunch of cards together, throwing them all around on the table, which was weird, but not the weirdest thing he'd done all night. Towards the end of the night, he just disappeared, and we heard a lot of thumping coming from upstairs.
...as extra rare magic cards around to try and get his attention.
Then I realized he dumped all of my extra rares that I didn't even have in decks, and that's what he mixed up into.
And afterwards, he went upstairs, at which point everyone started hearing loud thumping. Apparently, Lance...
Oh. That's not surprising at all.
Lance had gone into a temper tantrum so intense that he was literally thrashing around on the floor, which...
Acting like a child and a toddler. And this person is like, what? 20 years old at this time? 25, 24 years old? I don't know.
Hopefully was just a tantrum and not some kind of seizure, because at this point, Lance is really a prime candidate for that to happen. Their peer continues. After that, Lance went mental. I'd get to Lance and Tyler's place, and he'd be super wide-eyed with either a loopy grin or a rictus grin like the Joker, depending on his mood. The nest came back full force, and Lance started living downstairs full-time again. This is a picture of a kind of cleaned-up version.
Oh.
Imagine this type of mess, but denser and all over the living room and kitchen counters.
Okay. Yeah, that's not great.
He started playing on his DS and drawing stuff in, I think, Pitcho Chat, and scribbling it all out. While giggling with the wide-eyed Joker smile. He'd either be doing this, or his experiments, or talking with ChatGPT day in and day out. He hardly ever slept. The experiments got scarier too. Like jugs of water with a whisk full of aluminum foil that had 2 copper wires coming out of them. The water was clear one day, and at some point, I think the wires got plugged into the outlet because the water turned brown and the aluminum foil was pretty burnt. He also started leaving little papers around the house that he had scribbled on while doing that giggling thing. It's at this point that our leaker here sent an extensive set of pictures he'd taken of the state of the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Watching this is just like a fucking flashback rodeo of some things, dude. Not as intense to some degree, but in other places, yeah.
And the notes Lance left around. First is an image of their magic table, completely vandalized with garbage that mostly resembles electrical stuff, which is odd because Tyler was the one in an electrical apprenticeship program, not Lance.
So probably what happened is Tyler had a bunch of that stuff from the electrical program, and Lance just took it and was fucking with all of it.
In the background, we can see what looks to be some kind of aquarium or big glass container with rocks in it, which may be the mold experiments mentioned in the messages. Underneath it is what looks to be a package for a rock tumbler, which makes sense given that Tyler occasionally did masonry with his dad. But it's when we move to what's actually on the table that things get increasingly bizarre. And we have isolated pictures of all of the particularly interesting items. I'm gonna say right now that I'm actually a specialist in literally nothing, so this is just gonna be me trying to interpret these to the best of my abilities, and the screenshots I'll be looking at will be made available in the description for those of you who want to take a look for yourself and see if you can extract some sense out of the madness of Lance's post-it notes. The first one we'll go over is this one, which contains a set of spiral-like scribbles that may be disconnected attempts at making the Glock logo, given the squared spiral G.
Nah, I think that's... No. What I think that is the old G... I think it was a Gap, or it was like a gangster G symbol. It was like back in like elementary school, that symbol was pretty popular.
And the word lock near it. Right above this, there's also what looks to be the small phrase E equals T, and elsewhere on the note, I can also make out the words regent and temp, although I have no idea if this is alluding to anything in particular.
These are just the drawings of somebody who's high out of their mind and literally losing their shit. I'm just gonna say it, man. Like, I've seen this before. I have a lot of family who's had substance abuse problems and things like that. This is just what people who are going batshit do.
Particular. On the right side of the image, another post-it has the sentence "all of separate" underneath what looks to be the portmanteau "no linguals." This is very rough to make out, obviously, but bilingual means that someone knows 2 languages. Monolingual means that someone knows 1. Therefore, no lingual would mean someone who knows no languages, or someone who is nonverbal. The next set of scribbles is a bit more cohesive, although I'm using that word pretty loosely here at this point. Here, we can see "stop looking for others" at the top, and "Terraria Buggin' Tear Ableist" in the middle, which I think may be some wordplay with terrible and ableist. At the bottom of this page, an illustrated version of the word sine wave is written above "lose it at the tude," next to a picture of some bizarre looking animal. This "at the tude" bit to me is very reminiscent of how schizophrenic people will break words down and obsess with syllables, word morphology, and portmanteaus. There's another example of this in one of the post-it notes where he writes "I'm alone," obviously doing what I'm talking about here. On another page, we have "monsumus sumptuous" right at the top, followed by "SFTU piteous," which I assume is like "shut the flip up, idiots," maybe. Further down the page, there's a rough sketch of America with the number 21.0 inside of it, and nearby phrases like "go to the store" and "small box, go listen to act." A lot of this stuff reads like Lance is just writing his mundane thoughts or whatever he's seeing on his phone in the most cryptic and insane way possible, but some of it does stand out to me as potentially meaningful or at least consistent. On a post-it note, he writes down "TY" and "miss my BF," obviously in reference to Tyler. On another one, we have "stop crying, stop stopping," and in one of the pages, we have the phrase "full stop," very jagged at the bottom, although this may be bull or something else. On this page, there's something pretty interesting, as the words "federated" and "fed-related" are right next to what looks to be the word CIA, and further down, a drawing of 4 symbols that ever so slightly resemble what you'd see on a set of Zener cards. If you're not familiar with what these are, Zener or Zener cards were created in the early 20th century to test if people had extrasensory perception, and much later on, they were frequently reported as being used in gifted and talented education programs. There are a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this topic, some of them being more credible than others, but they typically have to do with the CIA project MKUltra, and Gates may be some kind of offshoot of it. I won't get into the merits of these theories, not only because Wendigoon should be the one to do that, but also because it doesn't really matter as much as the reason why people are drawn to this topic online in the first place. You see, if you check on Reddit, the majority of people who engage in discussions about the nature of GATE programs are people who were in GATE themselves, obviously, meaning they were, at some point, considered to be gifted. You may have already heard about this, but there's a sizable phenomenon of gifted kid burnout, where people who used to be overachievers in their childhood, usually in the academic sense, could no longer keep up as they got older, and so their life spiraled out of control. Part of this phenomenon is that when they can't get over their attachment to how they were treated when they were seen as special, they come up with all sorts of extraneous reasons to justify their decline and convince themselves that they're still gifted in some way. Given that Lance is quite literally documented on video as a gifted kid, being an adept piano player from a young age, and his life definitely went downhill as he got older, it would make sense for Lance, in one of his weed, paranoia, alcohol, and hallucinogen real maxing binges, to stumble upon this stuff while doom scrolling and decide to scribble about it. This notion that Lance is still attached to the idea he's special or somehow intellectually gifted is later corroborated by this anonymous peer. But even just examining his projects, Lance clearly thinks he's doing something here. Among the incoherent scribbles, there's hot glue and electrical wiring and batteries, which leads me to suspect he actually believed he was putting something together. And maybe some of these scribbles are, at least in his delusional mind, blueprints or rough sketches. At least some of his drawings had symbols that resembled electrical circuit diagrams, some even written on books about electrical stuff like impedance phenomena, while others had mathematical symbols as if he was writing down equations. Although, of course, none of it actually makes any sense to me or probably you. I will say, some of this stuff legitimately gets pretty scary. To think that this guy melted his own brain to the point where he was drawing this is horrifying. Besides the consistent appearance of circuit diagram-like straight lines leading to symbols and drawings and references to spirals and spiraling, there's one image in particular that really got my attention. On what looks to be two pieces of cardboard, Lance wrote, "Hormonal flux is way fluctuative," followed by definitely orchid denialism. If you don't know, orchid is actually the medical term for balls. So with the context here being him mentioning hormones and of course identifying as trans in the few months prior to Tyler's attack, orchid denialism could be a reference to him outright not acknowledging or recognizing his balls. I can't make any other conclusion besides that one, but as I said earlier, all of the images will be available for you to peruse. And although a lot of it is just random babble, I am hoping that by someone else other than I taking a look at this, there can be some information extracted from these images. The anonymous peer continues, "These scribbles look bad, but it's even worse when you saw his face when he was doodling it, combined with the giggling and how vigorously he would scribble. It was very scary.
I don't doubt it.
The way he spoke was weird. It was a bunch of words, but none of them made sense together, or sometimes it'd be in rhyme, or just sometimes he'd only smile and point at things. If I was religious, I would have called him exorcist. The smile was so scary, and he showed me what conversations he was having with ChatGPT. He told me he solved some equation backwards and showed me the ChatGPT text as proof. The chats were just paragraphs of random Greek and I think Roman symbols with numbers and random letters going on and on. He'd somehow gotten it to respond in kind as well. He told me to start scrolling faster, and so I did. And he kept telling me faster until he was basically screaming at me to scroll faster, and the ChatGPT chats just went on like forever. I was sat there scrolling at max speed for at least like a minute or two, and by the bottom, it was still in the weird symbols. He started yelling at me that Nikola Tesla was abused by the people in his time, and that no one we knew was smart enough to solve that equation, including me, because he is way smarter than me. This was all in weird, broken up sentences too. Definitely added to the creepy factor. Tyler told me that Lance had basically been up for like 3 days straight talking to ChatGPT at that time. It's interesting that he mentions he'd get an exorcist if he was religious, because when I was going over Lance's Reddit post, posts, he talks about how once his family threw him out of the house, saying he was possessed by a demon. If this is what they were having to deal with, that becomes a lot more understandable. As far as the ChatGPT conversations in Latin and Greek, another common fixation of people who are schizophrenic is hermeneutics, the interpretation and analysis of biblical texts, often in their original language or as close to it as possible. There are huge online communities for esoteric and occult interpretations of the Bible revolving around sacred geometry or gematria, which, given Lance's repeated use of broken maths in his notes and scribbles, may have contributed to his delusions here. Again, this doesn't mean that this was actually happening, but it's a decent guess here. Again,
for that. Is that a cross? Ooh, okay. He may have been going on those things. Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. The only thing that I can think there is like the cross and Zeta being the word up there. Then educate, them, expel them.
This doesn't mean that this was actually happening, but it's a decent guess as to why those two specific languages and equations keep popping up in Lance's activities, despite him showing no interest in foreign or dead languages elsewhere. The messages continue. He'd sometimes just be sobbing in Tyler's arms, and Tyler would be rocking him back and forth. We all thought Tyler was a trooper for putting up with Lance in that state. So the next image attached in these messages is one that I don't think I can show you guys on YouTube, but you will be able to check it for yourself in the description. But it's a
no joy. So this is all in Substacks. Okay. So that's the creepy shit. That's the drawings. I'm not gonna analyze these too much because it just spooks the crap out of me, and I don't want to. There's a lot of these. I'm gonna slow scroll because I feel like if he's censoring it, I'm probably gonna have to as well. Okay, I will have to block that out. Yeah, okay. Fascinating, lovely.
A used condom on the sink of the bathroom in the common area. We know this photo was taken in their apartment because the counter, sink, toilet, and other details matched this photo of their sink taken from a Zillow listing. The same applies to another photo of the table in their living room, which once again matches the Zillow listing, as we can see that the window with the white blinds is in the same location. As nasty as this is to even take into consideration, it is worth noting that it is completely empty, which leads me to think that even if Tyler was still engaging with Lance in this way, it was more out of pity or a sense of duty than anything else.
Yeah.
As Pierre says, crazily enough, while Lance was like that, Tyler was still hitting it. When I told Lance I would be leaving the general area, it was crazy. He snapped back to reality for a second and just thanked me for all the good times we had had hanging out throughout the years. After that, I think Lance had been brought back just a little bit, and he even let Tyler take him out of the house to start seeing a psychologist. It almost made me feel bad because, not gonna lie, I was starting to become really apathetic and not really care about what happened. Like, it was just so much energy to try and deal with Lance.
I don't doubt
Tyler was a real trooper for dealing with him. Lance even calmed down enough for us to hold like 3 more magic nights. We all thought Lance would be okay because he had Tyler, who was basically his handler at this point, to take care of.
That's so sad. That's so sad. And In reality, he wasn't a handler. He was...
of him. Eventually, my friend who lived across the street from their apartment let me know that Lance had gotten into an argument with his grandpa, who owned the apartment, and his grandpa had taken his car away. This I'm not sure about, but I suspect it put him into another one of these spirals. I imagine Lance was just alone with Tyler in the apartment, just driving Tyler crazy. I'd be hard-pressed to stay sane while living alone with Lance while he's like that. I joined a couple Discord calls with Tyler and Lance would say one thing and then be silent, and Tyler would just talk normally. Tyler even joined a call 2 weeks before the assassination and acted completely normal. All of this is really interesting to me because...
So what I can imagine was actually going on in the background is I've been Tyler handling this, and I've been not as bad as Lance, obviously, because I'm not trans, I'm not all of those things. But I've definitely jumped the shark, been off the deep end, and I've been the one having to be handled. So I can see both perspectives. And my best personal analysis is that Tyler was watching this happen to the person he cared about and loved. And he wanted someone to blame. And what is he probably seeing a lot of the time? If he's watching a lot of leftist sources and a lot of people who are left-leaning, especially because, well, the person he's dating is left-leaning, so I'm inclined to believe he was doing the same thing. He's seeing a lot of Kirk's clips, Charlie Kirk's clips. And he's probably watching the person he loves absolutely go mental about this and lose it. And it is draining and eating his soul. And eventually he has no more soul. But he still has what he thinks is love and care. And so he goes out to do what he does. I find that to be the total plausible link. I can totally see it having happened. I can totally see how that would be, or where things went.
As while we did have an inkling that neither Tyler nor Lance were in their right mind by the time the attack took place, it seems like the situation was that Tyler was being subjected to an incessant barrage of genuinely psychotic ramblings from a paranoid and deranged Lance, who had recently become significantly more political. As is customary for people with these kinds of delusions, they start fixating on prominent people, imagining they have some specific relationship to that person, usually that they're being stalked or otherwise directly antagonized by them. This
is the person you love. So now you've given a target.
This is probably when the name of Charlie Kirk entered the mix. And while it was probably just one among many delusions Lance would probably forget about by the time his episode ended, it seems it seeped into Tyler's mind as the cause of...
I don't doubt it, because Tyler was normal and needed an outlet. And he wasn't going to turn to God because he'd already given up on God. Because he's an ex-Mormon. And a lot of ex-Mormons go full atheist. So it doesn't surprise me.
Of Lance's problems. Obviously, there's the political context of it, with Lance being trans and Charlie being conservative and criticizing the trans community. But judging from the leaked messages between Lance and Tyler, it does seem Lance himself is taken aback and shocked that Tyler did what he did. If I were to guess, Tyler took some of the things Lance must have said while in a state of delusion to heart, while Lance had already forgotten about them a while later.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
Concludes his messages by saying, after talking to another friend apparently right after he did the shooting, he joined a bunch of Discord calls asking if anyone had seen the news while breathing heavily. And literally the next day, he was in call just chatting with people while playing his puzzle games. And also for the record, Tyler 100% calls Lance my love when they are talking alone. Hopefully this sheds some light on what it was like behind the scenes. With all of this context provided, I think it's beyond the shadow of a doubt that the last messages exchanged between Tyler and Lance are real. It also elucidates the nature of their relationship, as Lance was someone Tyler was mostly taking care of rather than having a normal relationship dynamic with. From the looks of it, it seems like Lance is someone who, at least at one point, was very self-aware and proactive as a person, being confident enough to argue with others over his worldview, while Tyler has always been quiet and stayed in the background of any setting he found himself in, including his relationship with Lance. Unfortunately, it turns out that he was simply less expressive of his thoughts. Now, the leaker also sent me their Discord logs, and this dynamic of Lance being the expressive one while Tyler played a subservient role is also reflected there, as Lance messaged the chats way more frequently and even had his own server. The logs I got are of 3 different servers that Tyler and Lance were parts of. Lance under the name Lanceolotl and Fluxolotl, and Tyler is the name Zealous_Monkey and Bedbug Inspector. These messages date all the way back to 2020, and although most of it is pretty irrelevant stuff and boring, it is kind of spooky to see that at some point these guys were like completely normal, just sending memes to each other on Discord. Interestingly enough, Tyler frequently spoke of going fishing or making fishing trips that lasted for days with no cell service, where he would speak to no one. While this isn't really negative, it does differentiate Tyler from his peers. There's one kind of introvert who stays indoors and plays on the computer, and then there's go fishing in the middle of nowhere with no cell service for days kind of introvert. Still, at least early on, it's clear that the people in this server have no issue with offensive humor and don't necessarily swing politically in any given direction, although there are a few odd things that I have to note, even if they are just jokes. In mid-2020, someone else in the server tags Lance and says, "Nobody said gross when you said you wanted to bang your 2-year-old cousin."
Fantastic.
Lance. The context of this is that the same guy who sent this message said he wanted to bang snake girls, and Lance responded by saying gross. But honestly, this doesn't explain that much. Another interesting tidbit from these chats is when the topic of religion came up, prompting Lance to say, "Isn't Brigham Young the one with all the quotes about how black people are cursed and can't hold the priesthood until they get uncursed by God?" For context, Brigham Young was an early leader of the LDS Church. In response, the person with whom he was talking said that most religions start screwed up, implying that
they do, except Christianity honestly doesn't. Gonna be real with you. If you actually read the Bible, not that screwed up of a start. And they don't really start screwed up. I've been digging and digging, boys. Their fundamental ideas start off horrible, to a degree. The base foundation is faulty in a lot of them.
That they would get better over time, to which Lance replied, "And most still are," basically shutting it down. Long before the gender issue was something Lance was invested in, his earliest strong opinion is a clear anti-religious sentiment. Still, at no point here is there any sign that Lance's opinion is unquestioningly shared by the entire server, as most people here express pretty reasonable and mixed opinions. Around the same time that those messages about Brigham Young were sent, they were discussing politics and video games, but no one was really arguing as much as they were just expressing their views in a friendly manner. Eventually, Lance says auth-right lib-left unity, referring to the squares of the political compass of authoritarian right and liberal left. So clearly politics weren't taken too seriously by this friend group. A little while later, still in 2020, Tyler can be seen commenting on the presidential debate, saying that it was hilarious, but making no further comment. In September 2020, Lance says, "Femboy Friday greater than Tomboy Tuesday, White Girl Wednesday isn't where it's at," followed by White King Wednesday. These seem to purely be jokes, as he showed no signs of identifying as a femboy at this point in time. As a matter of fact, when someone else sends a few messages saying, "Femboy hypnosis is finally working, my nipples are so puffy, Jesus Christ," Lance responds with 2 long strings of question marks. Although this may 100% be irony on Lance's part, in November 2020, he sent "Vote Jeb" to this chat, referencing Jeb Bush's failed and often leaned on 2016 presidential campaign. Interestingly enough, at least back in 2020, Tyler seems to be the one who was more politicized from the Discord Discord messages. At one point, he went as far as to suggest that freedom of speech should be amended so that vaccine and COVID skepticism was not protected by it and could get you punishment by the government.
So
also, I've repeatedly seen people claim that Tyler was a furry, but in these chats, he seems to deny it, as when another user says he is one, he replies by saying, "I told someone I wasn't gonna watch their anime one time and get called a goddamn furry. This country is going downhill." Earlier on, even Lance was open to cracking some more edgy jokes, like me proving that being black is a myth and calling other people libtards. And I'm under the impression that he engaged with lolcow and internet drama culture to some extent. The reason why is because there's a good few messages of him talking to someone else about Terry Davis, where he calls Terry a weird nerd, but acknowledges that he has a sad story, while expressing no hang-ups about someone else in the server, echoing Terry's use of the N-word to describe CIA agents. There's also a good few messages in which Lance can be seen discussing Chris Chan and his current girlfriend, where Lance says Christorians must be praising the sun, with one odd message comparing someone's looks to janky, which could be in reference to someone else in the server, but most likely is in reference to Isabella Janky, one of Chris Chan's most infamous tormentors and A-logs. As of 2022, Lance sent a few messages complaining about H3H3, saying this: "Can't stand the podcast or new content. His old videos are still good. I don't understand how he was able to go from genuinely goofy and enjoyable content to purely bad political takes and one of the most boring podcasts I've listened to. Half the time, he won't even let guests talk. He just interrupts them to make a bad joke and then doesn't let them finish." Another interesting token of Lance talking about the kind of content he interacted with online is his positive review of Wendigoon's content, which seems to come from Isaiah's videos on FNAF lore based on other messages sent by Lance to the server. To put it simply, up until some point in 2024, like I already suspected in my first video, Lance was mostly normal and didn't take much of anything very seriously.
But he was
even when his
doom
scroll nest phase began, he was still capable of making light of what he was up to, saying the following: "I have begun only sleeping on the couch, cooler downstairs, and less room to move, or I fall off/get eaten." Tyler, on the other hand, seldom engaged in the same degree of joking as Lance did. The most I could find on him suggesting an interest in edgier online content is a GIF that he posted of Gypsy Crusader. When he did send text messages to the server's chat, it was usually to give people a small window into his private life. In 2020, there was some conversation between him and other users talking about a YouTube channel he once had, which contained a tour of his bedroom. Unfortunately, as far as I know, and according to the messages Tyler sent here, this video and the entire channel have become lost media. In 2021, he said that his brother had accidentally discharged a firearm and shot a hole in the wall, with no further comments from Tyler. In 2023, it seems he became a bit more talkative, and he shared a few more times about his electrical apprenticeship program and what kinds of things he had to do in it. But any apparent character development for Tyler came to a screeching halt in late 2023 to 2024, when Tyler's messages became noticeably more politicized, some of them in reference to war in the Middle East, and some of them joking about the assassination attempt on Trump, saying snowflake liberals can't shoot straight because they too busy being gay. While he was definitely still reading the room, so to speak, and not breaking into a rant, he clearly became more agitated about these things. Curiously, another member of the group chat was at a campus of all places when a shooting took place, and Lance responded with concern. All of a sudden, this agitation too gave way to something else, mostly silence. As Lance became increasingly present in servers and started one of his own, the femboy server, as he put it, right around the time they started dating, Tyler became increasingly inactive, even less expressive than he was initially. Most of the information from this time period comes from Lance, who notified the group chat when he was going on a date with Tyler or watching TV shows with him. Speaking of TV shows, it's quite possible that the show they were watching was Beastars, the big furry anime show, because Lance discussed it in the server on a few occasions. Now, from late 2024 to early 2025, some of Lance's messages further corroborate the claims made by his and Tyler's anonymous peer. First off, he says that he's been chronically sleeping from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., and that it's been wreaking havoc on his life. Then, we have a ton of messages in his own server where he's talking to ChatGPT, although I'm sure this is only a fraction of the full extent of his communications with it. Lastly, we have Lance inviting everyone in his server to attend the anti-Trump No Kings protest. past. Over the previous half a decade worth of Discord messages, nothing from Lance comes even close to as clear of a political expression as this. As far as Tyler's presence in Lance's server, one of the last messages I was able to find of his was sent in August, where he simply says, "I am very ill." Within a month of this message, the tragic day of September 10th comes around, and the following day, Tyler sends his confession message to their old friend group server. It's interesting to me that he sent it in this server and not to Lance's new server, because I'm not sure why that is. It could just be that he was less familiar with the people there, but based on the kind of messages sent there, which we're going to go over later, it could be that he wanted to avoid having anyone say something that resembled support for his actions. In the original group chat, one of the most prominent users replied, saying this: "Hey everyone, if you haven't seen the news yet, Tyler's post above is true. He was taken into custody earlier today for the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Regardless of the horrible actions that took place, we must take this moment to remember that God is a living and loving God who loves all his children. God calls sinners to be his saints, and I ask that you all take a quiet moment to pray for Tyler and his repentance. While Charlie Kirk's politics were not acceptable to some, I ask that we all say a prayer for him and his family during these confusing times. Love you all. God bless." Given the clearly religious nature of this post, it's safe to say that this particular Discord server was pretty varied in what kind of people were in it, especially since it mostly went quiet after the attack on Charlie Kirk. Over on Lance's server, Lance's final message there was from a day after the shooting, tagging a user that, as of the archiving of the messages, was no longer in the server. After Tyler's crime took place, many of the users complained about the harassment and unwanted attention from journalists and random people online digging up everybody Lance was connected to. That's a perfectly reasonable reaction, especially since, as far as I can tell, most of them just occasionally played video games with Lance, so their connection to Tyler was tenuous at best, even if they shared a Discord server. But there are a few things I want to go over that I didn't mention in my previous video, such as the fact that Tyler had a few blurbs of unusual online presence that I hadn't seen. For example, he had a DeviantArt under his older handle, Crafton247, where he lists himself as they/them. It's not possible for this account to belong to someone else that created it after the assassination, as it was created 2 years ago. Then we have another account with the same exact handle, this time on Fur Affinity, but there doesn't seem to be any significant activity on it, just like on DeviantArt. And for those of you who don't—
Yeah, but dude, I've had fucking those kind of accounts before with no activity, but they were pretty active, if you catch my drift. If you catch my drift, like, again, I went down the deep dark rabbit hole. I'm gonna be honest with you. So, yeah.
Don't know, Fur Affinity is like the furry website. It's the #1 furry website, okay? Now there's also 2 Reddit accounts under the names Crafton247 and Crafton248, neither of which contain any significant info. There's one post on each account, both of some pretty mundane content and from years ago, long before he was dating Lance and became more politicized. Now lastly, there are the Steam accounts of both Tyler and Lance. Tyler was clearly much more active on Steam, being level 50 on the platform. It is interesting that Tyler once set his name on there as Donald Trump, but besides that, nothing of note really. Part of why there's very little to say is that Tyler clearly set most of his settings to more private options, which again is pretty reflective of the kind of guy he was. Lance, on the other hand, had pretty much every facet of his profile completely public, where we can see that the last game he played was 2 days after Charlie's death, and his profile has been completely inactive since then. Given the testimony from Tyler and Lance's friend, even people who knew them in real life and frequented their living space only ever caught glimpses of the exact nature of their relationship. Based on the last few months prior to Charlie Kirk's assassination, as far as I understand, they weren't really having anyone over, and their output of messages to their online friends also significantly decreased. I have done my best to contact Lance about all of these claims and get his side of what happened, but he has not responded to 3 different requests for comment. Unless one of them, Tyler or Lance, decides to speak up and elucidate the lead up to what happened, I think there's no chance we can piece together a full narrative of the events that contributed to Tyler's mindset. Clearly, it was politically motivated, as both Tyler and Lance had become much more political, particularly around the topic of gender. Hopefully one day, we'll get all the answers. Anyhow, I've been Turkey Tom.
Okay, that was a pretty interesting video. My general thoughts on it is, Yeah, honestly, when this happened and it was released about him and the other stuff was released, I was like, he was in that relationship, huh? Well, I can imagine the rabbit hole he went down. And the reason why, again, is because of the life I've led. Obviously, the difference between me and them is I completely deviated paths, and I thank God every day that I have. And I wish he had. Because then it wouldn't have happened. But it's in God's hands, and that's all we can really say about it. That's gonna be it for this video, guys. Catch you all later, and have a good one.